Serial killers have made several appearances throughout the Fallout timeline. Some are pre-war, while others are after, but regardless of when, their actions can be seen in the news. And in some circumstances, we can see their work firsthand, and on one specific occasion, actually converse with the killer himself. Now, this isn't a definitive collection of every serial killer in the Fallout universe, only the ones that I know of, and while some of their identities are unknown, there are theories as to who they might be. The Pint-Sized Slasher, one of, if not the most, recognizable serial killer in the Fallout universe. When we hear the words serial killer, we think of a deranged, mask-wearing, knife-wielding maniac lurking in the shadows, and the Pint-Sized Slasher is exactly that. In late July 2052, the Pint-Sized Slasher committed the Linden Street slayings, a tragic event that resulted in several Americans losing their lives. Walter Street Beat Monroe, a writer from the Capitol Post, wrote a top story regarding the incident, taking quotes from Joseph Field, Germantown's police chief, and Christopher Atkinson, the only survivor to encounter the Pint-Sized Slasher and live to tell the tale. During the interview, Christopher Atkinson commented that the one who killed his brother, Sean, was a little clown. The police chief commented that the autopsy results confirmed that the force and direction of every knife wound were consistent with an attack from a much smaller assailant, a child to be precise, confirming what Christopher had witnessed. Walter finished the story by saying, "What could possibly motivate a child to don a clown mask and murder innocent people in cold blood? We may never know, at least not until the miniature maniac is brought to justice. Until then, all we can do is lock our doors, kiss our children goodnight, and pray they live to see morning." According to the Capitol Post newspaper seen during the loading screens, the Pint-Sized Slasher was formerly an urban myth used to scare children into behaving. It was said the Pint-Sized Slasher appears from a dog kennel at dusk and then proceeds to chase the children with a toy knife. Similar, if not exact, to how we ourselves can do so in the Tranquility Lane simulation. The vault dwellers trapped inside flee in fear, most likely remembering the Linden Street slayings that haunted the nation. As for their identity, in Fallout 3's add-on Point Lookout, the lone wanderer can find the very same clown mask once inside room 1K at the Homestead Motel, and again on a table in the Miner's Rest section of Kenny's Cave. It's unknown if either of these masks are genuine Pint-Sized Slasher masks or simply replicas. It's likely that Kenny doesn't even know who the Pint-Sized Slasher is, since he wasn't alive before the Great War, so I think it's fair to say that his mask is likely a Halloween costume, while the skeleton in the bath could be the remains of an adult Pint-Sized Slasher. The killer, after all, was never found, and the bombs dropped 15 years after the Linden Street slayings, so the killer would be much older, adult-sized if you will. And then of course there's the patient records in Fallout 4's Parsons State Insane Asylum, which tells of a Robert Bobby Smith, a 9-year-old boy committed to the asylum by his parents after he admitted to stabbing and killing several people. It's speculated that Robert Smith is in fact the Pint-Sized Slasher. This theory simply doesn't work. At the time of Robert's commitment in 2074, he's only 9 years old. The Linden Street slayings happened in 2052, a full 13 years before Robert was even born. I think the closest we may ever come to truly knowing who the Pint-Sized Slasher was is sitting in the bathtub in room 1K of the Homestead Motel. The Fens Phantom was a pre-war serial killer based in Boston. His lair, for lack of a better word, is the Fen Street sewer. Heading inside, the sole survivor witnesses the results of the Phantom's work. The Phantoms not only gathered but also arranged numerous skeletons and body parts into humorous and amusing ways. Each one of these displays is accompanied by a chalk cross. It is said that each one of these crosses represents a life that the Phantom has taken, so the more crosses, the more lives. The scenes vary from very creative, such as the depiction of the Circle of Life, to extremely morbid, especially when it comes to the four mothers and their empty strollers. Throughout the sewer, the sole survivor can also find the Dear Detective tapes, a collection of 4 holotapes that the Phantom has created for his pursuer. Through these, we learn that the detective has come to the sewer at the killer's request. The killer goes on to say that life up on the surface is exhausting, smiling at people who don't care about you one way or the other, but you still do it because that's what you do. Down here, he gets to be himself, and these displays are the Phantom's way of showing who he truly is. Even though the Phantom states on the first holotape that he's already left the sewer, the final holotape reveals that they do in fact cross paths. The Phantom explains that he didn't want to hurt the detective, but they left him no choice after they hurt him first. The Phantom forgives the detective for their actions and the hurtful things they said, stating that it no longer matters now that they're together and have all the time in the world to get to know each other. So what happened to the detective's body? And more importantly, where is the Fens Phantom? There's a couple of theories as to what happened during their altercation. The first theory is that these two skeletons are the Phantom's and the detective's remains. We know the killer was male from his holotapes, but we never hear the detective's voice, so there's a chance that she was female, matching the sexes of the skeletons. The machete sitting beside the skeletons is believed to be the murder weapon, used to both fatally wound the Phantom and to kill the detective. Whilst wounded, the Phantom moved her body into position, drew 2 crosses, and lay beside her until succumbing to his injuries. The detective was the only person he wanted to share his life with. As he so poetically words it, they were each other's objects of fascination, and although their lives couldn't be spent together, he figured their deaths could. The other theory is completely different, and it all stems from the fact that this skeleton is the only one to show the way it died. All of the others are portrayed in ridiculous ways. Take this one, for example, or this one. As you can see, they've been rearranged, while this one has not. It is believed that the Phantom and the detective came into contact inside this room. The detective managed to hurt the Phantom in some way, perhaps with the ball-peen hammer. Ultimately, the Phantom bested them, driving the hammer deep into their brain. But that only explains what happened to the detective. As for the Phantom, he mutated into the glowing ghoul who could be found resting nearby. Personally, I prefer the first theory. It's very reminiscent of Hannibal Lecter, an eccentric serial killer, and Clarice Starling, an FBI agent. I also like the idea of the Phantom becoming a part of his own display. It was the only place he could truly be himself, and now he gets to do so with the only person who understood him indefinitely. The Nuka Killer is another pre-war serial killer based in Boston. Unlike the Fens Phantom, we don't actually see any of their work, and instead everything is learnt through police documents. By heading to the Nahant Sheriff's Departments, the East Boston Police Station, and the Coast Guard Pier, we can read 3 homicide reports that all share a common theme. As far as we know, the Nuka Killer took the lives of 3 people, Gonzalez, Yavitz, and Wright, who were all found with sodden clothes and their eyes replaced with Nuka-Cola bottle caps, hence the name. The bottle caps is just a calling card, or perhaps a crude version of laying an item upon the eyes of the dead. In some cultures, stones with eyes painted onto them are lain over the deads to remind the faithful to not fear death. This tradition symbolizes that while our eyes have closed in this life, they've opened in another. In other cultures, coins are used instead. These are said to be a bribe for Karen, the ferryman who takes the souls of the dead across the River Styx. While caps are considered currency in post-war, pre-war they would have been nothing more than what they are, bottle caps, so I don't think it has any meaningful explanation and is nothing more than the killer's way of marking his victims. As for the killer's identity, I couldn't find any theories, and it's a real shame considering one of the add-ons is an entire Nuka Killer themed amusement park, where the killer could have struck again or left a trail that the sole survivor could have followed to more victims, perhaps even discovering a unique weapon that the killer used to remove their eyes. A missed opportunity to be sure. Pickman is the first serial killer on the list who can actually be encountered and interacted with. During a random encounter, you may find a raider's corpse with a calling card that tells you to come find him, and this can be done by traveling to Pickman's gallery. Now, Pickman as a person is approachable, collected, and extremely well spoken. You wouldn't expect him to be the kind of person he really is, but during the brief and somewhat pleasant conversation you can have with him, he casually mentions that his all-time favourite hobby is collecting the heads of raiders, which we can see proudly displayed throughout the gallery along with his various pieces of artwork. In the basement is his latest piece, a group of extended hands engulfed in flames reaching helplessly towards a giant eye. It's clear from his paintings alone that he's an incredibly disturbed individual. During the first encounter with the killer, Slab, the leader of a group of raiders, along with two of his men, have tracked Pickman down, seeking revenge for the many friends that Pickman's killed. The sole survivor can either let the raiders kill Pickman, lend a helping hand and rescue Pickman, or kill everyone involved. The outcome really isn't that different. Either way, a key will be on Pickman's body or given to the player as a reward for helping him defeat the raiders. The key unlocks a hidden safe behind the Picnic for Stanley painting. Inside is Pickman's blade, a unique knife that Pickman no doubt used to remove the heads of his victims. If Pickman was rescued, there will also be a thank you note. After that, Pickman vanishes. He's simply not seen anywhere else in the game. However, his calling card will appear from time to time. After all, a hobby is a hard thing to quit. In the forest near the North Kanawha Lookout Tower is a ruined cabin, with the door leading inside boarded over, but you can still make your way inside through the crawl space beneath the house. Below the cabin are several headless skeletons, and graffitied on the wall just beside them is a message. The words used to read "Sickleman was here," but since the Wastelanders update, the text has changed, now reading "Sickleman is here." If we search the rest of the cabin, we find the skeleton of a woman, presumably the one responsible for boarding the door, and the missing skulls can be found inside the hot tub above the crawl space. Although it isn't strictly said, I believe this woman was somehow involved with the Sickleman. More on that later. Fallout 76 takes place in West Virginia, and there's a book by Ruth Ann Music called The Telltale Lilac Bush and Other West Virginia Ghost Tales. One such story, Head in the Well, tells of a deranged man murdering the husband of the woman he once longed for. The killer used a scythe or sickle to remove the man's head before burying it in the woods and dumping his body down a well. While this may just be a reference to that particular book, it could be something more. In the Savage Divide west of the RNG station is a small house with a police car sitting in the drive. Heading inside, we see the remains of a woman clutching a sickle. Beside her is not one, but two capless skulls, and at the end of the living room are two skeletons, which are believed to be the remains of the police officers who came to arrest her. If that wasn't enough to connect her to the cabin, she also sits in a rocking chair with a birdcage just beside her, the same chair and cage we see outside the Sickleman's cabin. So, was this woman somehow involved with the Sickleman? Well, I believe the Sickleman isn't a man as the name would suggest, but in fact a woman. And not just one woman either. I believe these two women were the killers. At some point, the police figured this out and followed them home, which is why we see the police car in the driveway. Now, judging from the scene inside the house, I think it's safe to say they didn't succeed. The killers may have had the element of surprise, which is how they managed to overpower the officers. Once the fight was over, one woman began burning the evidence, while the other returned to the cabin to do the same, sealing herself inside so she couldn't be disturbed. I sense a much bigger picture that has yet to be released. These women could be the Sickleman, but they could also be sacrificing people in the name of Sickleman. And there could even be a third woman out there that we have yet to see, that's still alive, continuing the sacrifices, and only after 20 years has enough blood been offered, hence the message changing from was here to is here. Who knows, maybe the Sickleman really has returned, and it's only a matter of time until we see him for ourselves. Westley and Carl Addington were two wealthy brothers who, before the Great War, co-owned and ran the Black Bear Lodge. The lodge itself was a family-friendly hunting club back when the Toxic Valley was a more hospitable place, when flowers and fauna had yet to be affected by graft and steel. During the hunting season, the lodge hosted many hunting-related events for the guests, including tournaments for the adults and shooting lessons for the children. These tournaments have continued on beyond the Great War, thanks to the Huntmaster 4000, who happily provides hunting targets to passing hunters. After one particular hunting season, Westley Addington grew tired of hunting the same prey every year, and to alleviate his boredom, he approached his brother Carl with a proposition. In order to make things interesting, they were going to hunt something new, something that would fight back, something a bit more cunning than your average animal. They were going to hunt people. At first, Carl seems a little hesitant, but if anything, he sounds relieved that his brother suggested it and not him. In order to make their newfound interest a reality, they decided to provide free weekend accommodation to the public. This ensured a steady influx of new customers, and thanks to their wealth, they could avoid any repercussions after certain guests went missing. After all, it's not as if a couple of prestigious brothers would do something shady, is it? Heading into the basement, the resident can witness the brothers hunting trophies, some finished, others currently in the making. It's unknown if the brothers survived the Great War, but the lodge's interior walls are smothered with the heads and claws of mutated creatures, suggesting that they did in fact survive. And judging from the large display and assortment, Deathclaw included, I would say they knew how to handle themselves. It's unknown as to where the Addington brothers have ended up, but theories range from them being the Sickleman with their wives also helping, and even Westley being the leader of the Mothman cult, since the lighthouse where the Mothman can be summoned can be seen from the Sickleman's cabin. October is right around the corner, so fingers crossed things become clearer in the coming month. Be sure to show your support by liking the video and subscribing if you haven't already for more Fallout content. If there's anything you would like to see in a later video, leave a comment and I'll see what I can do. With that said, thank you as always for watching, and I'll see you in the next adventure.